So, as you heard, Lados have called you, we have side events prepared for you from now till the end. You can all find it in our official app for Android and, of course, online when you check into our virtual conference. Nice to have you all. If you're just joining us, we are still here in the main hall. We have keynote speakers and case studies prepared for you, and the sides events are something more particular and more maybe interesting for you if you're part of the industry. So check, of course, all the side events as well, and some of them are already in our agenda. You can always check it through the agenda which time you would prefer to visit the side events, or maybe if you're particularly into something, you can check out when it's proposed to be, maybe not today, maybe even tomorrow or day after tomorrow. Now we carry on with another great speaker who will be speaking to us about something which maybe few of you understand, but she is inside the business long enough that we can be sure that she will be telling us the truth, all the truth and nothing but the truth about something which is called common criteria. We're going to talk about basics, we're going to talk about how to implement all of it, but we are now proud to represent a cybersecurity lover since 2011 as a consultant, and now she's working full-time to be here with us. My great pleasure to greet Anna Prudnikova with us. Unfortunately, hi Anna. Fortunately, you're not live in Sarajevo, but we are going to listen what you have to share with us because common criteria is knocking at our doors. Are you ready?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Tariq, for introduction. I'm going to share my screen right now, so give me a couple of seconds for that.
No problem. You start the sharing, and I will confirm is it with us, okay?
Yeah. Yes. Share. So I think it should be working right now.
Well, we see it all. We hear you loud and clear, so enjoy your 25 minutes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Tariq. Okay, so, well, as Tariq already mentioned, we are going to speak today about IoT certification and specifically the certification based on common criteria. And my name is Anna Prudnikova, and right now I'm working as a senior security certification specialist at Secura. Secura also one of the sponsors of the conference, and we are mostly dealing with different projects, and I'm specifically working with all the type of certification that are available on the market, and the company is located in the so we are going to speak today a bit about the security of IoT products, why it's different from the general security. We are going to take a look at the standards that can be used for consumer IoT security. Then we are going to have a quick crash course on common criteria. Then we will see how it can be adapted to the consumer IoT devices. Then we will briefly take a look at the example evaluation for level 3. And we will wrap up with the market value and international recognition. So first of all, the IoT products, they consist of multiple components, which leads to the fact that there are a lot of different threats that are possible. So let's take a look at an example of an IP camera. So typical security system based on the IP camera includes the camera itself and the server which receives and processes the data from the camera. And each of those components have a firmware and hardware parts. And moreover, there are also multiple ways to communicate with those components. And taking that into consideration, we can identify at least the following threat vectors. So first of all, at the firmware level. And the questions here are, was the firmware modified before being flashed onto the device? Are updates cryptographically signed? Are there checks before the boot sequence? Then the next level would be the hardware level attacks. And there the question will be, are JTAG ports disabled? Can a logic analyzer be used to extract data from the chips? Then the next level will be communication level. And then the question will be, is Bluetooth Wi-Fi connectivity in the device securely configured? Is there a transport encryption in place? Then the next level of the attacks will be the web app interfaces. And the question will be, are passwords hard-coded? Are the web applications secure? Can the local credential be brute forced? Then the next level will be physical security, and at last the logs and events. I'm not going to go into details, but as we can see, there are a lot of different attack vectors possible. To secure an IoT device from the threats that we just discussed, the developers, they should include security controls in their device. And the responsibility for introducing those security controls actually lies within the developers. But how to choose which security controls to include? There are now multiple standards that introduce a set of security control to assure the security of the product depending on its functionality. And one of the most known standards that can be used to assure the security of any type of IT product is common criteria. And this is going to be our focus for today. There are also other standards that can be used to certify an IoT product, such as ETSI norm or IEC 62434-2 standard. We are not going to go into details with them, but if you're interested to know more, you can always take a look at our website, secura.com. We have some white papers, some nice webinars also on the topic of IoT security. So we've been speaking about common criteria, but what is common criteria? Actually, the full name is Common Criteria for Information Technology Security Evaluation, but it's normally referred to as Common Criteria or CC. And what it is, it's actually just an international standard for computer security to certify different types of IT products. And it is currently in version 3.1, revision 5. It consists of 3 different parts. And also on top of that, the evaluation methodology. Again, I'm not going to go into details. If you want to know more, I really recommend you to go to our website and check the webinars or the white papers that we have there. So how does the common criteria certification scheme works? Well, basically, the products can be evaluated by competent and independent licensed laboratories. And Secure is one of those. So as to determine the fulfillment of particular security properties, to, of course, a certain extent of assurance. And the certification of the security properties of an evaluated product can be issued by a number of certificate authorizing schemes, with this certification being based on the result of their evaluation. And actually, different countries have their own certification schemes. Well, we work in the Netherlands, so that's why we are working together with the Dutch scheme. And in the Netherlands, the scheme is called Netherlands Scheme for Certification in the Area of IT Security, also called NSCIP. And there are 2 main actors in the scheme. So first of all, the Netherlands National Communication Security Agency and TÜV Rheinland. There are 3 main types of IT product that could be certified based on CC requirements. Well, so first of all, those are the general types of IT products. And this is going to be our focus for today. Then the smart cards and similar devices. And you can also certify the hardware devices with security boxes. The process of certification includes several steps. So first of all, the developers of the product, or so-called target of evaluation, they can make claims about security attributes of their products. Laboratories can evaluate the products to determine if the products actually meet those claims. And then the evaluated products are further examined to a level of detail specified by the level of assurance, also called EIL, and we are going to discuss a bit later on that. Then certification bodies determine if the laboratory have sufficiently performed documental and technical assessment activities defined by the common criteria standard. And then in the end, certification issuer, in most cases, it's the same entity as the certification body, issues a certificate if all requirements are satisfied. The important component of common criteria is assurance. And assurance is a property of the TOR, which we discussed in our product, which gives the confidence that the claimed security measures are correctly. Common criteria has a concept of evaluation assurance levels in place to represent this assurance. And the coverage and depth of the evaluation activities increases the higher selectal level of assurance gets. Well, this means that an evaluation level 1 will have the lowest associated volume and depth of the evaluation activities. And the common criteria actually introduces 7 assurance levels. You can see them on the slide. I'm not going to read through them, but I can already mention that if we are speaking about the IoT product, most likely we are going to focus on the level 1, 2, 3, and 4, because the higher levels are mostly for more complex products, but I'm going to discuss a bit more about that later. So every IT product aimed at certification according to common criteria requirements should claim a set of requirements that they comply with in the form of a document which is called security target. And creating the security target is an important process in obtaining the certification for the product, because all the following evaluation activities are based on that. And the creation of the security target is the responsibility of the sponsoring party who would like to certify the product. It might be either the developer of the product or a third party who want to certify the product. It might happen that the sponsor of the evaluation does not have the necessary expertise or experience to create a security target themselves. And in this case, it is highly recommended to use the support of the consultants from evaluation laboratories or just from third party to create the security target. Because in this case, this will allow you for additional assurance that the certification process will run smoothly. So let's take a look at an example evaluation for an IoT camera. The security target always starts with a product overview. So it includes the description and the description of the typical functionality of the product, which includes the description of the typical usage and the scope of the evaluation. And if you take a look at the example for the network camera, it will be sounded something like the target of evaluation is a network camera, which comprises a hardware board and a specific firmware for the hardware. The TOR provides a management interface and video over IP functionalities with high security, trusted paths, and audit logs. The main part of the security target is actually the security problem definition. And actually, what is the security problem definition? It is a description of threats that the product addresses, security policies that it should adhere to, and assumptions about the operational environment and security objectives for the product. So again, let's take a look at the example of the network camera. So an example of the threat in this case could be video manipulation. So in this case, the threat agents may try to modify the integrity of the video data sent to the recording device. An attacker may try to manipulate video by amending the middle, and so on. Then what could be the policy that the product should adhere to? Well, an example could be the password length, and it sounds like password shall contain a minimum 12 characters. Then what should be an assumption that the environment should follow? It could be something like trusted network system, and then it says attackers have no chance to connect any malicious devices into the local network of the TOR. And what could be the objective of the product? Well, the objective could sound something like firmware load integrity, which means that the firmware image during the firmware loading is verified by the TOR in terms of integrity and authenticity to ensure that only valid firmware updates are accepted. Common Criteria offers a set of well-understood security functional requirements that can be used to create trusted products reflecting the needs of the market. And these security functional requirements are presented as the current state of the art in requirement specification and evaluation. And every IT product, which is aimed at certification according to Common Criteria, should claim a set of requirements that they comply with. And those are actually represented in the form of security functional requirements, and they represent the functions of the TOR that support IT security. And basically, their behavior can be observed. And here we can take a look at the example that we can use for our network camera. This is taken from Common Criteria Part 2, and it is called FIA AFL.1, and it's called authentication failure handling. I'm not going to read the whole requirement, but there are two parts to it, and there are multiple parts to how you can choose the security function requirement and how can you write it down, but that's a bit more details and we don't have time for that. Then in general, Common Criteria introduces two types of requirements. So first of all, the functional, as we just saw, and there are the second type of requirements, so-called assurance requirements. In general, there are 9 classes of assurance requirements. And if we speak generically, security functional requirements are needed for creation of security target because they do represent the security functionality of the product. And security assurance requirements are needed to evaluate this product based on the security target to actually make sure that the security functional requirements are in place. And here on the screen, we can see an example which of the class evaluation of security target. And the first one is called security target introduction. There are also multiple components to assurance requirements. There are components that should be followed by the developer, which they have C on the end. And then we can also see that there are requirements with E on the end, and those are the evaluator activities. So basically, the activities that someone who's evaluating the security target or the product should do. So how to choose those security controls, because we already discussed that you need to include in security target what security features or security controls should be in place. Well, there are multiple ways to do that. First of all, well, let's say the most straightforward way would be to refer to a protection profile. And the protection profile is basically a generic form of a security. So a protection profile is a implementation independent set of security requirements for a category of tool that meets specific consumer needs. So, for example, if you're speaking about protection profile, that could be a protection profile for the firewall, and the security target will be for a specific model for a firewall, for example, for Cisco firewall. Then another approach would be top-down approach. And in this case, you start think about the environment in which your product operates. Then you think about the objectives that your product should actually follow, and select the requirements from common criteria part 2. And the last approach could be the product approach. In this case, you start with defining what actually the product does, so its functional requirements. Then from that, you derive the objectives, and then you select the requirements from common criteria part 2. So to provide a better understanding of the evaluation procedures, an example of the evaluation of a general IT product evaluated under level 3 requirements is taken. So there are 7 applicable classes of assurance requirements for level 3. And as we already discussed, in general, there are 9. So as we can see, for level 3, there are only 7 applicable. Those can be security target evaluation, development documentation, guidance documentation, and so on. And the whole certification process is also quite complex. And because of that, let's say, we can see that there are 3 phases: monitoring and certification. That's why also the timelines for evaluation will be quite long. And if we're speaking about the evaluation of level 3, you can expect at least 4-6 months of the whole process from preparation to the issue of the certificate. And if we speak about the evaluation process, the developer of the product should have certain products documentation and processes in place. And the list of typically required documentation is presented on the slide. And the evaluation lab can actually support the sponsor in developing the required documentation and establishing the correct procedures. It could be done within, let's say, a separate contract in which the evaluation laboratory also puts there the consultancy as an additional work. And then during the whole evaluation, the evaluation laboratory also needs to tell about that to certification body. And the further details on the concept of the required documentation can be found in common criteria methodology document. And they are always should be considered when you perform the evaluation. So before you start the evaluation, you really need to have this documentation in place. For example, you should already have the guidance documentation, the documentation that describes your development life cycle, the secure development procedures, secure delivery procedures, and so on. So how to start to prepare your product and yourself to certification based on the common criteria? It applies to an IoT product, but also to any type of IT product in general. So first of all, you need to choose evaluation assurance level, and I'm going to discuss it on the next slide. Then you need to decide whether to create security target yourself or hire consultancy. That's something I already mentioned. And I really would like to point out that it's better to hire consultancy for that, unless, of course, you're already experienced with common criteria evaluation. And, of course, make sure that you have the required documentation as I presented before. So this question of choosing evaluation assurance level is very important because it impacts not only the timelines and effort of the evaluation, but, of course, also the final obtained certificate. In general, it is important as a developer to consider what is aim for applying of common criteria evaluation. If the aim is to obtain the general health check of the product based on a respectable evaluation methodology, then level 1 evaluation might be sufficient to satisfy this person. If the aim is to maintain certification of the direct competitors, then the goal could be to look for at least the level which these competitors have in place. And finally, if the goal is to sell the product to partners with strict security standards, for example, military, then of course it would be advisable to look at evaluation in the range of level 3 and 4. And as I already mentioned, it doesn't really make sense for an IoT product to go for higher levels. And that's going to be the last small topic of our presentation for today. There are several benefits of the developers to certify their products based on common criteria. And they include the better marketing position. They also include the improved security, which is really good for this kind of internationally recognized scheme. Then the possible advantages of over direct competitors, and of course, the acceptance of the common criteria certificates on the international level. And if we speak about the acceptance, actually common criteria is the technical basis for an international agreement, which is called CCRA. And there are multiple countries that signed, there are actually 31, and then recognition of issued certificates by all those countries is up to level 2 for general type of IoT products, which is the topic for today. And well, the current situation actually also introduces a new scheme, which was created based on the recent European Cybersecurity Act. And the first draft of this European Common Criteria Scheme was introduced in July 2020, and the final version will be in place somewhere this year. And this European Common Criteria Scheme will actually replace all the national schemes, because as I already mentioned, for example, each country has their separate schemes. Yes, I am finishing right now. Well, in this case, there also will not be any more national schemes. There will be one European scheme, and the first evaluation under Common Criteria Scheme is expected somewhere in 2022. And that was actually it. So I'm right on time. And if you have any questions, you can contact me or Julia, who is our account manager. We are glad to help. We are also sitting in the booth the whole day. So just feel free to ask any questions. And thank you.
No. Thank you, Anna. I see you prepared all of it. We have a few questions for you, actually. I'm going to start with the easy ones, okay?
Yeah.
Already. So,
sure.
How can we ensure that the IoT certification becomes a truly global effort? And is it really necessary after all? Be honest, please.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, about the, let's say, international, that's a bit of a more complicated topic, but of course we can always ensure that it is recognized at the European level. At least if we're speaking about the upcoming scheme for common criteria in Europe, all the countries from the European Union, they will be forced to recognize those certificates. And to be honest, also based on our experience, there are also benefits not only to assure and to show the certificate that you have some security in place, but you also can improve the security, because during the evaluation procedures, you can see some vulnerabilities in the product. And then you can give those vulnerabilities to a developer who has still a chance to fix it. And then in this case, in the end, you have a better product, and you also have a certificate on top of that.
Thank you, that was honest enough. We have one more question for you. If you're ready, it sounds like this. How do we make IoT certification the key driver to reduce the cybercrime rates across the globe?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Let's say the topic of IoT security in general is a really hot one, as we all know. And let's say for now, there is a bit of a lack of this main scheme that could be this driver. But for that right now, there's actually the European scheme again. So we are not speaking about international level for now. We're speaking about European level. And the standard's called ETSI norm. You can take a look at that. I also presented in the slides. And I do believe, because this is a really recent scheme, so it's been introduced, I think, in 2020 only. But I do believe if we start to follow that scheme and if we start introducing it in Europe, that can really increase the level of security of IoT devices, and which means that decrease the whole threat vectors for the IoT devices.
Okay, so we have to be prepared to disconnect the bad guys. But now maybe the most important question of the day. Where are you now, Anna?
Well, right now I'm actually in Russia because I'm originally from Russia, so I had some family emergency. But in general, I'm located in the Netherlands.
So, спасибо, Россия. Hope to see you soon. And
Thank you.
no problem. Thank you for this very interesting lecture which you had with us today. And of course, if they have any other questions, they can always contact you as you already said. So enjoy the rest of the day. И до свидания.